Good evening and welcome. Welcome to That's the Law. I'm BJ Krintzman. I'm an attorney in Newton, and I have a general practice, but I do a lot of family law. And the subjects we're going to talk about tonight touch on every aspect of family life. This is the first show we've done on Zoom. And I've been doing this show for, I think it's 23 or 24 years, but we're on Zoom because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And after waiting several months for the studio to become available, figured out it may not become available for a while. And the topics that we're going to discuss tonight are of immediate interest and necessity that they get discussed. And you'll know why in a moment, which is I'm going to introduce our guest. We are really honored to have with us Ambassador Alan Solomont. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, BJ.
And Alan, should be well known to Newton viewers. Well, one reason is his wife was on the show. I think it was about a year ago. We had her on when her book was coming out, and her book was called Lost and Found in Spain, Tales of an Ambassador's Wife, which, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that immediately after she was on the show, it skyrocketed to #1 on Amazon. Is that correct?
All over. And it is still available on Amazon, along with the children's book that she wrote, Stella, the Ambassador.
Right. So that's Susan Solomont, the wife. And tonight we have the husband, and we are thrilled. The Solomonts are well known in Massachusetts because they are politically active and they are extraordinarily generous and philanthropic. So let me begin, Alan, by thanking you for all you have done with your generosity. Really wonderful of your family.
You're very kind, but it's a great blessing for us.
Alan has a varied history, and I did not say checkered past, okay? Varied history. And he began his professional life. I think he owned elder care homes throughout New England, but I guess haven't been in the elder care business for about 25 years. One of his stunning roles was as the finance chairman of the Democratic National Committee. He did that in 1997. And then after that, he was appointed ambassador to Spain by Barack Obama and served as the United States ambassador to Spain from 2010 to 2013 for about 3.5 years. He had served on many, many boards, came back and sort of is concentrating now on just a couple of boards, one of which is a company in Spain, which is involved in, is an energy company in Spain. Alternative energy, renewable energy in Spain, and the other is J Street. Let me pause there for a minute. Tell me a little bit about your work with J Street.
Well, I've been involved with Israel all my life. My uncle is buried on the Mount of Olives. I have a brother who made Aliyah 30-odd years ago. He has 5 sons. There'll be more babies with the name Solomont born in Israel in the next generation than will be born here in the United States. And back in the early 90s, when Bill Clinton was president, I got very involved in the peace process, in the efforts to settle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through a negotiated 2-state settlement. And those were very optimistic days in the 90s. And then in 2000, after Camp David fell apart, the peace process fell apart, and we entered a period of, where people lost hope in the possibility of 2 states. But about 12 years ago, in 1998, an organization was created called J Street to support elected officials who would stick their necks out on behalf of supporting a 2-state solution in the Middle East. And then when it was first started, it was somewhat controversial. Some political figures were afraid to take the endorsement. Today, J Street endorses more than half of all the Democratic members of the Congress, both in the Senate and in the House, and has developed a really important voice in speaking out on behalf of Israel and on behalf of peace. But J Street's a very vibrant and exciting organization. I'm very proud to be associated with it. and we have a very strong presence here in New England. And I am sure that many of your viewers are somewhat familiar with it.
That's fabulous, Alan. Thank you. I noticed, it's hard not to notice the background that when we're all on Zoom now. And I noticed the flags in back of you. And you've been active on an international stage for quite a while now. Tell me about the flags.
So those are the flags that flew on my car, on my limousine that I was driven around in Spain when I served as the United States ambassador. Actually, a friend of mine stole them. The State Department doesn't give a lot of things away. So a friend of mine lifted them, I would say, and gave them to me as a gift. And it's a good reminder. The flag on the bottom is the State Department flag, and there's Old Glory. And it's just a reminiscence or a remembrance of a period where I had the great privilege with my wife, Susan, of serving our country, serving President Obama, and hopefully working on behalf of a good relationship between an important ally, Spain, and the United States.
Can you, I'll give you 100 words or less, tell us what that was like to be an ambassador to Spain, such an important country?
It was the most exciting experience of my life, I have to say. I got up every day and I worked as hard as I could on the most important issues facing the world. It was a period, as it is today, there are no national problems anymore. There are only global problems. Barack Obama believed in bringing nations together to try to deal with these global problems, both allies and, frankly, countries with whom we differed. And so I had a very important role in working with a very important ally to try to address issues that were matters of our shared agenda. And I got to do it with my wife in partnership. You can read about it in her book, Tales of an Ambassador's Wife. And so that was really an important part of it. And we fell in love with Spain. Spain showed us a lot of love in return. And I hope many of your viewers have gotten a chance to visit or will so as soon as we're able to travel again.
Well, I've read Susan. I had her as a guest, but I've read her book, Lost and Found in Spain, Tales of an Ambassador's Wife, available on Amazon. And, when you said that those were the flags, that the banners that you were on the official ambassador's limousine, I don't know why, but I was thinking about when you hired the Oscar, was it the Oscar Mayer Wiener or something? The hot dog, a big hot dog thing, and had a party for everybody on 4th of July, maybe it was.
It was on my birthday. I happen to love hot dogs. And each year for 3 consecutive years, my wife threw me a surprise party. On each occasion, I was totally taken aback and was oblivious until the moment of surprise. And in each case, the feature was a hot dog party. And so the last year we were there, she hired the Oscar Mayer Wiener truck. And they served hot dogs to the embassy staff on the front lawn of the residence. There were moments of very serious work when we served, and there were obviously moments of a lot of fun.
Such an exciting time. Yes. And Susan captures that in her book. She really does. You mentioned global. The world is flat now, and we live in a global world, and nothing has brought that home more vividly than COVID-19, which was, I joke, I stocked up on toilet paper when I heard there was a butcher in Wuhan who was feeling a little under the weather, because that's where we are now, is that it's everything is global.
Somebody made an interesting observation in that regard recently, that this may be the first international threat that all countries are facing in common. In past crises, the world was conflicted around things, world wars or arms races. And it hasn't brought the world together the way I wish it would. And we can talk about why that is. I think it's relevant to what you want to talk about, DJ. But it is, I think, worthy of note that this is the first threat that all nations of the world are facing similarly. I hope at some point we deal with the climate change in the same fashion.
Right.
But we can talk about that as well.
Right, right. Well, with the pandemic, I agree with you that it's affecting the entire world, every nation. The reaction to it has been different in various countries. The herd immunity theory, as opposed to the social distancing and all that. But what I also think, and I'll bet anything you agree with me, that you hear people say we're all in this together. And, I think nothing has divided us more than this, in terms of really magnifying and seeing the difference between the haves and the have-nots, and the democracies and the dictatorships, and where the world is. And it's not surprising to me that the George Floyd a whole explosion came right at this time, because it's all being uncovered.
No, I think you're right that, well, I think it revealed underlying divisions that exist in our country and throughout the world. That doesn't mean it's not possible for people to come together and overcome their differences and pursue a common purpose. But as a student of leadership, and having observed some really great leaders in all sorts of different sectors, one of the most important responsibilities of a leader is to bring people together. It's one thing to have a vision that you project about a better world, about a better day, but in order to really be effective, you then have to rally people together, bring them together around that common vision. When I was ambassador, and we used to have town hall meetings to sort of talk about the embassy's priorities, I'd always show a picture of an 8-person skull, or a boat rowing on the Charles, to talk about the importance of getting a team rowing together. And that's what really effective leaders do, is they rally people together around a common objective, a common purpose, or even a common enemy. And that's one of the things that is sorely lacking in the world today and in this country.
And Alan Solomont knows whereof he speaks. He is the dean of the Jonathan M. Tisch College of Civic Life.
That's correct.
And that involves leadership, that involves civic duties, civic activism, and you've been doing that for quite a while, I think now, haven't you?
I've been the dean. It's at Tufts University, by the way, which is my alma mater, from which I graduated 50 years ago this spring. And I've been doing that for 6.5 years. Susan and I came home from Spain 7 years ago this month, and 6 months later, I started in January of 2014 as the dean of the Tisch College of Civic Life.
Well, in what you were just talking about, you kind of anticipated my question, which is, how do you teach leadership in, let me be blunt, in the United States of America in 2020, when we have the exemplar of what I would call the worst possible form of leadership we could have, leadership by division, by divisiveness, by anger, by combativeness,
Well, first, we teach civic responsibility. So it is true, we look to leaders to bring us together, but we all have civic lives and civic responsibilities. Some people ask me, what's a college of civic life? And I tell them, we all have professional lives about our work. We all have social lives. We enjoy with our friends and family. We have spiritual lives. We all have civic lives when we work with other members of a community to deal with common challenges. And we work on those common challenges from a place of individual responsibility to the group. And so the Tisch College of Civic Life is about educating tough students to think about what kind of civic life they are going to lead, regardless of what they study or what their career path is. We work with medical students, engineering students, arts and sciences students, so that every student at Tufts develops the values and the knowledge and the skills to be effective citizens and to pursue productive lives. And that's what we do. So that's the prerequisite, I think, of leadership, is having a community of people who are prepared to cast their lot with other members of the community.
Now I have to ask you, because this is just 2 weeks after George Floyd was murdered in Minnesota, and so I have to ask you. And the youth have taken to the streets.
Yep.
And I haven't seen this since Vietnam, probably. You know, this kind of nonstop perpetuating movement. Would you categorize that as a form of civic engagement?
Oh, absolutely. I don't mean to interrupt you, but it certainly is. I mean, civic engagement is when ordinary folks, citizens, and I don't mean that in the legal sense, roll up their sleeves and participate in dealing with common challenges. I think we're going through a profound moment in our history, and I think it's different. You know, I lived through the Vietnam era. I was in college. I was politicized at that time. It really informed probably everything else I've ever done. And I've participated in civil rights issues. I've seen our cities, be the places of, violent confrontation and violent uprising, if you will, over the years. There's something very different going on. And one thing I think is that's different. First of all, I think it's not just young people. I think it's people of all ages. And it's not just people of color. It's not just the victims or the people who have lived with institutional racism, and worried about being stopped by a cop, or worried about, being followed, or some of the things that we're learning are part of the everyday experience of our African-American neighbors. If you see what's happening, it's white people who seem to be coming to terms with America's original sin. When people at the Defense Department and in the military, agree that we should remove the name of Confederate generals from our army bases, when white politicians, when NASCAR decides that they're going to remove the Confederate flag, something's happening, and something's happening that is different. And the optimist in me wants to believe that we have reached a tipping point. We've really reached a moment where people are saying, this is not the country that we should be. It's not the country maybe we thought we were, but we have a sense that there's a different country that we have to create together. And in order to do that, some of us have to confront, some of our privileges and some of the experiences that other Americans have had to live with now for centuries.
And I've been proud of Massachusetts, because the reaction here was not get these kids off the street, get these people off the street. It was giving them room. They have to be heard. Both the governor has said this, Marty Walsh, the mayor of Boston, has been saying this. So I've been pleased with the reaction. I have been at countless webinars, 2 yesterday, that were all about the lives that Black people have led, and how their lives are so fundamentally different from ours. And the tip of the iceberg is just that if I'm in trouble, I would call the police to help me. And Black people they have to train their children, how to behave in front of the police. You know all these stories. Yeah. But this really gets to the meat of the show that I wanted to talk about, which is that our president, his reaction has not been what you and I would like it to be. He does not represent how we want to see ourselves, how we want to think of ourselves, where we want to be positioned in the world. And my friends and I discuss this all the time. And I'm tired of discussing it. I want to know what to do, what I can do. Civic involvement to help dump Trump, take back the Senate. And sometimes you feel that your voice is lost in Massachusetts because we know how Massachusetts is going to vote. You know, we're kind of a solid democratic state. So
this democracy belongs to us. It doesn't belong to someone else. It belongs to us, and we have to take some responsibility for that. And although it's not sufficient, a prerequisite for change is to participate in the political life of our country, in the political life of our communities, our Commonwealth, our nation, and to show up. And one of the main basic ways we do that is to vote. You know, this person was elected president in 2016, despite, you know, Hillary Clinton's having, you know, won a significant victory in the popular vote. But I believe, look, I've been doing politics since I was an undergraduate. There is an inscription at the Kennedy Presidential Library as you go in that says, "This library is dedicated to the memory of John F. Kennedy and to all those who through the art of politics seek a better world." That's what I was reared on, and that's what I learned as a college student, and that's what I've tried to practice all my life, is to participate in politics as a vehicle for seeking a better world. And the basic way you exercise that participation is by voting. Donald Trump was elected not because of who voted for him, but because of who didn't show up. Because too many Americans have lost faith in our politics. Too many Americans have lost faith in our democracy for many good reasons. But it's time we take it back. And the generation or the people that are going to take it back are young people. So in addition to educating tough students to lead productive civic lives, we are the home to a nonpartisan research shop. It's also a think tank and an advocacy organization that's one of the nation's leading authorities on the civic and political engagement of young people. We've been studying youth voting now, or my colleagues have been, for 20 years. We saw the power of the youth vote in 2018. The outcome in the midterm elections, and especially in the House, were influenced enormously by the fact that young people showed up in larger numbers than they have ever before. And they voted in a certain way by margins greater than they ever had before. And young people didn't always support Democrats. They supported Reagan in the 80s, and they, you know, so it's just happens to be, for many reasons, because of issues, because of leadership, that young people today are voting Democratic by overwhelming majorities.
All right. Well, Alan, let me jump in, because this is of particular interest to me. I went to a swing left meeting, and this was all about getting rid of Susan Collins, because Maine could be a critical, you know, it's one of the states we need to flip, essentially, to take back the Senate. And by the way, everyone has to recognize it's not enough to grab the presidency. We also need a Senate that is Democratic. But what I was horrified by was that what they were talking about was that, and I believe what you're saying, that we need the youth vote. And what they were talking about was letter writing campaigns and writing postcards. Okay. And I gagged, because kids are not reading postcards. Okay. They don't even have mailboxes. Kids are only online. They are only on their phones, and they are on social media. Mm-hmm. And that's where we need the biggest presence, I think. Okay. Yeah. And I believe the Republicans are way ahead of us on social media right now. So please tell me you're doing a lot about in those spheres.
Well, I mean, this is what I've dedicated. I mean, I spent 30 years raising money for Democratic candidates. Some people know that. I didn't get to Madrid on my good looks alone, however helpful it may have been. But when I came back from Spain, I wanted to find a different way of participating. And the way I found is really, around the issue of getting young people involved. I mean, part of it is because of their overwhelming numbers. 40% of the eligible electorate today are between the ages of 18 and 37, and 40% of them are non-white. They have not historically shown up in high numbers. They haven't voted in the percentages as high as other age groups. Part of it is because nobody talks to them. Politicians don't take account of them in elections, and therefore they don't show up. And because they don't show up, et cetera.
But I think we have to reach them. We have to reach them, and
we are beginning to. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
go ahead. No.
I mean, I'll give you one example. College campuses across, and not all young people go to college, but 40% of young people, there are 20 million young Americans or Americans in college, in community colleges, as well as private colleges and public institutions. And campuses across this country are mobilizing, and college students are showing up in numbers that are unprecedented. The turnout of college students in the 2018 midterm elections was double what it was in the 2014 midterm elections. And they're doing it because they're talking to one another. They're doing it because campaigns are talking to them. They voted for Bernie in part because Bernie showed up and talked to them. Now that's not, they're going to vote for Joe as long as Joe talks to them, I believe. And look, the people who gather in living rooms in Massachusetts to write postcards to voters in Maine are doing a great service. They're participating in this process. They're reaching a certain portion of the electorate. That may not be the way to reach young people. The way to reach young people is, and I've talked to campaigns who are involved in this. I've talked to Sarah Gideon, who's challenging Susan Collins, and I've talked to her campaign. So what the Gideon campaign did is they recruited a bunch of college ambassadors, students from different schools around Maine who are organizing their peers, and who will organize them whether they are back on campus or not. If they're not, they're going to reach them through their devices. They're going to reach them through social media.
Exactly.
There really is a lot going on that I think we can be hopeful. But people say to me, so what can I do about?
Well, that's it. What can I do? And we're out of time, Alan. So tell me the most important things we have to do, and then we're going to wrap up.
Talk to every young person in your life and tell them that their vote counts, that they have the ability to influence the future of their country. But it is incumbent upon them to find out how to register, where to register, decide whether to vote, where they go to school or whatever, and then to show up and to talk to their friends. So we all have a responsibility and a role to play. Those of us who are not young any longer should talk to all the young people in our lives and remind them that it's important and that they really have a great responsibility and opportunity.
That's fabulous. And I think they may have learned this in the wake of the George Floyd stuff, the influence they can have, and especially in their numbers. So that's fabulous. I'm so sorry we're out of time. I have just loved talking to you about all these very terribly important issues. I really appreciate your coming on. Good luck in the coming elections, and I don't know, maybe closer to the elections we'll have you on again if you'll agree. I don't know, but we'll see if I can twist your arm.
If you ask BJ, perhaps. Thank you very much. Thank you for having this show. Thank you for raising these issues. I hope they don't take away your license because you're such a partisan. It's really terrific what you're doing, and what your son is doing is great too. He's working for a great institution. So thank you so much for having me on and for promoting my wife's book.
Thank you. Thanks again, Alan. And thank you for being with us. And we'll see you next time on That's the Law. Good night.